Welcome to Skytech-Lens. For generations, the United States and Canada have shared more than just the world's longest undefended border. Their economies became deeply intertwined, with billions in goods and services flowing seamlessly across the border every day. A car part made in Windsor, Ontario, might cross the border several times before ending up in a finished vehicle in Ohio. NAFTA and later the USMCA eliminated barriers, creating vast, efficient supply chains. Canada supplied energy, the US sent food north, each nation's prosperity tied to the other. This partnership was so stable, so predictable, that businesses and workers built their futures on it. But this harmony was about to be shattered by a political earthquake. The economic marriage between the US and Canada was about to face its most severe test. The calm of North American trade was shattered by President Trump's America First agenda. Trump saw global trade as a zero-sum game, blaming old agreements for lost American jobs. His weapon of choice, tariffs, taxes on imports meant to protect US industries. Even close allies like Canada were targeted, with sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum. The business community was stunned. Decades of free trade were upended overnight. Canada responded with its own tariffs, escalating the conflict. Trump's strategy was simple: apply pressure until trading partners gave in. But he underestimated the complexity of modern supply chains, and Canada's resolve. Canada didn't back down. Ottawa hit back with tariffs on US goods, steel, aluminum, ketchup, whiskey, targeting key American industries. The message: this trade war would be a two-way street. Meanwhile, China, also targeted by US tariffs, retaliated with duties on American agriculture, soybeans, corn, poultry, hitting Trump's political base. American farmers lost access to the Chinese market almost overnight, as buyers turned to Brazil. The US now faced a two-front economic conflict. Canada's broad tariffs and China's targeted strikes created real pain for American businesses and workers. The Trump administration's belief that it could force concessions without pushback was shattered. Both Canada and China showed they'd absorb pain to defend their interests. What was meant to be a quick American victory became a costly, global economic struggle. Everyday people on all sides were caught in the crossfire. The trade war had become a global economic battle. For ordinary families, the trade war quickly became real. Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum drove up costs for US companies, who passed those costs to consumers. Prices rose on everything from cars and appliances to canned goods and beer. Automakers warned of thousands of dollars in extra costs per vehicle. Some dealers added import fees right on the sticker. Construction materials soared in price, slowing projects and squeezing small businesses. Inflation surged, eroding purchasing power for American families. Canadians felt it too. Retaliatory tariffs made American products like orange juice and ketchup more expensive. The trade war became a tax on daily life, paid by ordinary people at the checkout. Policies made in Washington and Ottawa had very real personal costs. The pain was widespread and inescapable. Beyond price hikes, the trade war threw North American supply chains into chaos. Decades of seamless cross-border business were disrupted by tariffs and paperwork. Trucks at border crossings faced delays. Shipments stalled at ports. Small manufacturers in the US saw costs spike, forcing tough choices: absorb losses, raise prices, or scramble for new suppliers. The automotive industry, built on cross-border parts, was hit especially hard. Some parts were taxed multiple times as they crossed back and forth. Bottlenecks and shortages rippled through the economy. Tariffs meant to protect US industries ended up hurting them, making American companies less competitive globally. The trade war forced a painful rethinking of how business was done. The damage was deep and lasting. Canada realized a prolonged trade war with the US was a losing game. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government pivoted, diversify exports to Asia and strengthen domestic industries. The goal: reduce dependence on the US and build a more resilient economy. Canada set out to double exports to non-US markets within a decade. New trade deals, like the Comprehensive Economic Partnership with Indonesia, opened doors in Asia. Ottawa deepened talks with ASEAN, China and South Korea, focusing on energy, minerals, and tech. Canada marketed itself as a stable supplier for Asia's growth. At home, the government prioritized Canadian firms for infrastructure and public projects. The Buy Canadian approach aimed to create jobs and foster innovation. Instead of relying on US supply chains, Canada built its own. This was about building a stronger foundation for the future. Canada's pivot paid off quickly. Domestic manufacturing surged, especially in Ontario and Alberta thanks to government contracts and renewed optimism. The push into Asian markets was a hit. Energy and minerals exports soared. The LNG Canada project shipped its first cargo to Asia, generating billions in local contracts. Alberta and Saskatchewan secured long-term mineral deals with China and South Korea. Foreign investment in Canada hit a decade high. The Canadian dollar strengthened. Canada began processing its own critical minerals, creating more value and skilled jobs at home. The country emerged as a key player in the global high-tech supply chain. Meanwhile, the U.S. faced the unintended consequences of its own tariffs. Higher input costs made American companies less competitive. The promised manufacturing boom never arrived. Frustration grew in Washington. Congress moved to repeal the tariffs, and legal challenges mounted. American farmers, hit by China's retaliation, lost huge market share to Brazil. By 2025, the US and China negotiated a truce, but the damage was done. The US agreed to pause some tariffs, but trust and lost markets were hard to recover. The tariffs had backfired, inflicting self-inflicted wounds on the US economy. Inflation, stalled industries, and lost exports became the new reality. The country that started the trade war was now reckoning with its consequences. The lesson was clear. Economic walls can hurt those who build them. The trade conflict of 2025 is a cautionary tale about the unpredictability of economic warfare. The US tried to use its economic might to force concessions, but the results were far from what was intended. Instead of a manufacturing boom, the US got higher inflation, disrupted supply chains, and lost markets. The tariffs became a tax on American businesses and consumers. Canada, forced to adapt, emerged stronger and more diversified. The crisis sparked innovation and renewal north of the border. The trade war proved that punitive measures often boomerang, harming the instigator. Nations under pressure can adapt and find new paths to prosperity. Trade wars have unexpected winners and losers, upending old assumptions. In the end, resilience and adaptability win out over aggression and inflexibility. Thanks for watching. Subscribe the channel for more updates.